When you view these scenes, there is a single thematic feature that stands out. The colour. This is the work of the modern impressionistic auteur Nicolas Winding Refn. His recognisable use of colour as a significant feature of his directing style can be seen in his most recent films, the critically acclaimed Drive, Only God Forgives, and most recently, The Neon Demon. Refn uses visually exquisite colour palettes in his recent films to accompany their manic and wild narratives. He notably leans heavily on sultry, bright neon tones that are often stunning shades of red, yellow, and blue. He uses different variations of his general colour palette depending on the film and its story. The colours themselves are overpowering and impossible to ignore. The colours that Refn uses notably contrast heavily against dark backgrounds, which is instrumental in his purpose of the narrative. And as many of his films are set at night in these cruel underworlds of criminal and sometimes supernatural nature, the accompaniment of beaming colours visually demonstrates uninviting atmospheres that evoke uncomfortable emotions, which is fitting for the commonly disturbing narratives Refn likes to demonstrate. It's also worth noting that Nicolas Winding Refn is a director that is colourblind. His unique style of distinctive colours and clear-cut contrast is largely in part to his inability to see the full spectrum of colour. We'll take a look at some examples of Refn's remarkable use of colour in his recent films. Refn's most recognised work is the 2011 film Drive. The film was critically acclaimed for its stunning visuals and how they were uniquely used to demonstrate the neo-noir narrative in a modern context. His use of colour in this film is a little subtler than his later films. However, from an analytical perspective, its intentional use is most noticeable in the protagonist's relationship with his neighbour Irene. Earlier in the film, it is noted that Driver's world uses a predominantly blue colour palette, whilst Irene's world uses a red and orange colour palette. This compares their two environments. The driver has knowledge of the criminal underworld, whilst Irene has only been lightly exposed to this. These two worlds influence one another at different points in the film. When the driver enters Irene's room for the first time, we can see that the room is blue and dark orange. Irene's partner is in prison, which explains the presence of the blue before the driver enters her life. When they begin their conversation, the driver is framed in a blue background whilst Irene is framed in dark orange. This striking colour difference separates them even though they're in the same space. You can also see the driver's shadow in the mirror behind Irene, looking over the photo of her partner in prison. When they're at the garage, the driver wears blue whilst Irene wears dark orange. In the apartment after this, the driver sits in the blue area whilst Irene is standing in the dark orange area. When Irene's husband Standard returns, the driver sits in a cold blue room, embedding himself in his life of crime to distract himself from heartbreak. Standard and the driver find themselves in the same blue world after Standard is shot by a gang. Their conversation about his prison life afterwards takes place in a blue bathroom. After this, the driver visits Irene. He wears blue and she wears red. When they all have dinner together, everyone, including the young Benicio who saw his father get shot, is sitting in a blue room whilst Irene is still in a dark orange light, having not been exposed to the current situation. When she watches the news footage of Standard dying, she is in a blue room. When the driver comes back for Irene, she is the only one wearing blue. After the fight with the hitman in the elevator, Irene is entirely in a blue environment. She has seen everything. Once he leaves, Irene can be seen wearing red in an orange hallway. The driver sacrificed his potential life in his relationship with Irene to keep her safe. Another Refn film we can examine is his most recent release, The Neon Demon. The shots are notable for having sharp blended colours and high contrast. The main character, Jessie, throughout the film progresses from a pure virgin into a promiscuous model, ready to be harvested for her youth and beauty by the other models around her. This change from purity to darkness is represented through colour theory. Jessie enters her first fashion show in a drowned blue light. This represents her purity in the current world that she is yet to step into, and she appears mesmerised. Moments later, the light changes to red, representing a newfound promiscuity. She begins to act erotically and arrogant after this. It can also be noted that the other models, who are witches, are presented through a neon pink and purple light. Each time they're in shot, they're drowned in the feminine light. When the main witch, Ruby, enters Jessie's space that is drowned in a tinted blue, the colour tone changes to pink. Refn's films have been defined by a singular vision of a bizarre nature with a vibrant view. But it's not just the colours and tones of this film that are in such high contrast. Their subject matter and the themes are too. It's a beautiful way to represent the narrative through visual means, and Nicolas Winding Refn has done this perfectly.